Okay, so picture this. The year 2000, superhero movies back then weren't exactly the sure thing. They are now, they're like a bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
A lot of movies with some pretty questionable costumes and storylines.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, bam, X-Men hits the screens.
It really does feel like it came out of nowhere.
It wasn't just like, oh, that was all right. It was like, whoa, this is actually pretty good.
It was.
A lot of people were really surprised, and that's what we're diving into today.
That's right.
So for everyone listening, we're going to take a deep dive into X-Men 2000.
All right.
And all the stuff that made it so special. We've got a ton of user reviews, IMDb trivia, FAQs, cast lists, all that good stuff.
Lots to dig through.
And our goal is to find out, what made this movie tick.
Exactly.
Why was it such a hit, and what kind of impact did it have on the whole superhero movie thing?
Yeah, and I think what's cool about this deep dive is, for the listeners out there, if you want to get the lowdown on this movie quickly, but you don't want to skim over the details, this is it.
This is the deep dive for you.
Absolutely.
This is where you get it all.
Yeah, so one of the first things that really jumps out from these reviews is even people who weren't really into the X-Men comics before, they were saying how much they enjoyed the film.
Yeah, it's surprising, right?
That is.
I mean, one review even said, I'd never been a fan of the X-Men comics or the TV show, but I was surprised how much I enjoyed this movie.
That's pretty telling.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, that tells you this movie wasn't just for the hardcore fans. It had something for everybody.
It reached a broader audience.
It did. And there's this feeling in a lot of the reviews that it was like what do they call it?
Oh, yeah. They said it was a cinematic rarity.
Yes, cinematic rarity. A comic book movie that actually worked.
Yeah, there you go.
And another person even called it startlingly fun, and said it was up there with some of the best superhero movies, even comparing it to some later hits.
That's interesting.
So you kind of get the sense that maybe people were getting a bit tired of the same old superhero formula.
Yeah.
Maybe looking for something a little different.
Exactly.
A little more depth.
Yeah. And what do you think made it so enjoyable?
Well, a lot of the reviews pointed to how smart the movie felt. Like it wasn't just mindless action.
Right.
The direction was strong and the characters were really engaging.
Yeah, one of them even specifically said, X-Men surprised me with its intelligence, marvelous direction, and wonderful characters.
High praise.
High praise indeed.
Yeah, and speaking of characters, Wolverine seemed to really steal the show.
Oh yeah, Hugh Jackman.
Absolutely. Reviewers were raving about his performance.
And rightfully so.
He brought this incredible mix of instability, anger, love, and honor to the role.
Yeah. It was a really complex performance.
It was, and of course you can't forget those adamantium claws.
Visually iconic.
Oh, yeah.
So many people said that Wolverine was like the heart of the movie, emotionally, and that Jackman was just the perfect choice for the role.
I mean, he really embodied the character. And it's funny because one review pointed out that he actually got more depth in this movie that wasn't even focused on him than in the later Wolverine spinoff.
Which is kind of ironic when you think about it.
It is, right?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you get more depth when you're not the center of attention.
It's about the interplay with the other characters.
Exactly. The dynamic, and even little things like that joke about the yellow spandex between Wolverine and Cyclops.
Oh, yeah. That was a nice touch.
It showed they were paying attention to the comics without going overboard.
A nod to the fans.
Exactly. So moving on, we got to talk about Rogue.
Anna Paquin.
Yes. Her performance also got a lot of love in the reviews.
A lot of people really connected with her.
Yeah, they use words like heartfelt and beautiful to describe how she played this character who's dealing with some serious isolation because of her powers.
She couldn't even touch anyone without hurting them.
Right. It's a tough situation, and people really felt for her. And there was this intensity that Paquin brought to the role. Really powerful. And the scenes between her and Wolverine
They had some great chemistry.
They did some really memorable moments there.
They did.
And then, of course, you've got the heavy hitters Patrick Stewart as Professor X and Ian McKellen as Magneto.
Two legends.
Right. Some people felt that Professor X didn't get enough screen time.
Yeah, I can see that.
But everyone agreed that Stewart was just perfect as the wise mentor.
He had that gravitas.
He did. And what about McKellen as Magneto?
Oh, he was a revelation.
Yeah, he wasn't just some cookie-cutter villain.
No, he brought so much depth to the role.
People were really surprised by that.
He made Magneto sympathetic.
He did. He gave him a human side.
Which is not easy to do with a character like that.
It's not. And the chemistry between those two.
Oh, man.
Former friends now on opposite sides.
Peaceful coexistence versus mutant superiority.
Yeah, that was the core of the movie, right?
That conflict was really what drove everything.
Absolutely. But speaking of characters, we should probably mention some of the others.
Yeah, we got a whole cast of mutants to cover.
We do so. Storm Halle Berry.
She had some amazing scenes. You know those moments where she's really unleashing her powers?
Oh, yeah. But some people felt that her character wasn't developed enough.
Right.
Not enough depth. And then there's Cyclops James Marsden.
Now, he was a bit of a mixed bag for some viewers.
Yeah, some people found him forgettable, especially when he was wearing those glasses.
Yeah, I get that.
He was kind of underplayed.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Jean Grey, Famke Janssen.
Yeah, she didn't have a huge role.
Not huge,
Yeah.
but some people felt that her character arc was satisfying.
Right.
And then there's Mystique, played by Rebecca Romijn.
Oh, yeah, that blue shape-shifting mutant.
She was definitely visually arresting.
For sure.
But one reviewer did say she reminded them of the T-1000 from Terminator 2.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah, and Toad Ray Park, well, he was pretty much pure evil.
But entertaining evil.
Entertaining evil, right?
Shit.
And Sabretooth Tyler Mane.
Yeah.
One person even said he was just a less interesting version of Wolverine.
I mean, they are both kind of feral.
They are right. It's tough to balance a big cast like that.
It is.
Give everyone their moment to shine.
You can't always go deep with every character.
Exactly. But even though some characters maybe didn't get as much development,
Right.
the overall story was still pretty engaging.
Yeah.
Simple, but effective.
It gave those key relationships like Wolverine and Rogue and Xavier and Magneto.
Solid foundation.
Yeah, space to breathe. And those underlying themes, man.
Oh, they were powerful.
Prejudice, acceptance, the whole idea of being an outsider.
Timeless themes.
They really were. And that parallel between Magneto and Xavier.
You know, people were comparing them to Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X.
Wow.
It gave the movie this real weight. You know, something to think about.
Something more than just your typical superhero flick.
Definitely. And a lot of the credit for that goes to the director, Bryan Singer.
He was the mastermind behind it all.
He balanced everything so well. The characters, the story, the special effects.
Yeah, the reviews were full of praise for his direction.
Words like marvelous and intense. He told a great story without letting the effects take over.
And speaking of effects, that's another thing that really blew people away.
Special effects.
Yeah, a lot of reviewers said they were better than other big movies that came out around the same time.
Like The Phantom Menace?
Yeah, that was a big one. And there were these really memorable moments like that guy who dissolves into water.
Oh, yeah, that was creepy.
And those eyes bulging through the bars.
Unsettling.
And, you know, CGI was still pretty new back then.
So it was even more impressive.
Yeah, it would have been mind-blowing for audiences back then.
Absolutely. And they didn't just use CGI for the big flashy stuff.
Right.
They used it in those little normal moments, too.
It made everything feel more real.
More believable.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, there were a few reviews that mentioned the editing wasn't always perfect.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a couple of clunky moments here and there.
We can't win them all.
I guess not. So for all you action fans out there,
Right.
some reviewers did say that the movie wasn't quite as action-packed as they expected.
Except for the...
Yeah. The ending was pretty wild.
I mean, that train station scene.
Oh, man, that was intense.
Pure chaos.
And it probably didn't help that the movie had that PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
No on-screen deaths, not a lot of blood.
They had to keep it relatively tame.
They did, but the action they did have was really well choreographed.
Tight and energetic.
Yeah, you could feel the energy.
So overall, the reception was super positive.
People loved it.
Yeah, they had a blast.
It was a great start to the franchise.
Even if it felt like it was still finding its feet a bit.
Yeah, but it set the stage for everything that came after.
It did, and I think a lot of people credit X-Men with giving the superhero genre a much-needed shot in the arm.
Like a revival.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really cool is that it appealed to both comic book fans and people who knew nothing about the X-Men.
Yeah, it brought in a whole new audience.
And it even won an award from the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films in 2001.
And just to give you an idea of how well received it was,
Right.
It's got a 7.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb.
Which is pretty solid.
It is, and it's still super popular.
People are still watching it.
They are. So now let's take a peek behind the curtain.
All right, time for some trivia.
IMDb has all these cool little tidbits.
Love it.
So did you know that the original X-Men characters were created by like a whole bunch of comic book legends?
Oh, yeah, like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby?
Yeah. those two, but also Roy Thomas, Len Wein, Dave Cockrum, Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Michael, Golden, Mark Silvestri.
Wow, that's a lot of names.
It is, right?
Yeah.
A whole team of creative geniuses.
It's a village.
It does. And get this. They were considering a whole bunch of different actors for Wolverine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, can you imagine Doug Ray Scott as Wolverine? Or Aaron Eckhart?
Oh, wow.
Viggo Mortensen?
Okay.
Mel Gibson?
Now that's a wild one.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Russell Crowe, Edward Norton, even Keanu Reeves.
Wow, they were really thinking outside the box.
They were, but you know, it's funny because Hugh Jackman was pretty much an unknown actor back then.
Right.
And now he's like the definitive Wolverine.
It's amazing how these things work out.
It is. And here's another fun fact. Joss Whedon, you know, the guy who did the Avengers.
Oh, yeah?
He actually did some uncredited script work on X-Men.
Really?
Yeah, apparently
No.
he came up with that line Storm says to Toad and Wolverine's line about Cyclops being a toad and eye.
Oh, that's cool.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Just a little Joss Whedon flavor in there.
I like it.
And the IMDb FAQ section also goes into all these different theories about how you could actually kill Wolverine.
Oh, yeah, because of his healing factor?
Exactly. They talk about Leech, you know,
Yeah.
guy who can cancel out mutant powers.
Right.
And Rogue absorbing his powers.
That would do it.
Magneto messing with his adamantium skeleton.
Ouch.
This special blade called the Muramasa blade.
Never heard of that one.
Yeah, it's pretty obscure. And even some crazy future scenarios.
They really thought of everything.
They did. It's a whole mythology.
It is. And of course, we can't forget Stan Lee's cameo.
Of course, the hot dog vendor.
That's
It's tradition. And you know what else is interesting?
What's that?
For a superhero movie, back then, X-Men was pretty short.
Oh, yeah.
Just over 90 minutes.
They didn't waste any time.
They kept it moving.
They did.
So when we look back at X-Men,
Right.
it's clear that it was a turning point for superhero movies.
A game changer.
It showed that you could make a smart, well-made superhero movie.
And have it be a huge hit.
Yeah, and it kicked off this massive franchise that's still going strong today.
It did. And those themes it tackled.
Prejudice, fear of the unknown, the fight for acceptance.
Still so relevant.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's what makes the movie so powerful.
It gave the superhero genre a real sense of social commentary.
It did something that a lot of other movies weren't doing at the time.
No, they weren't. So after digging through all these sources,
Right.
it's obvious that X-Men 2000 was a really special movie.
A surprise hit.
It defied expectations, it brought in a huge audience, and it started a legacy.
And we hope that this deep dive has given you a better understanding of why this movie was so important.
All those elements that made it a success.
Exactly. But here's a final thought for you to chew on.
Okay, I like it.
The movie's all about prejudice against mutants, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see those same themes playing out in the real world today?
Good question.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fear of the other, the prejudice, the discrimination.
And how do superhero stories, even though they're fantastical, how do they contribute to the conversations we're having about acceptance and understanding?
It's something to think about.
It is.
Maybe the next time you watch X-Men.
Right?
Or any superhero movie for that matter.
It's food for thought.
It is.